On Mother's Day, my phone buzzed with a notification from our family group chat. 48 people. My mother had sent a document. I opened it. It was an invoice. Itemized, formatted, with a header that read, "The cost of raising a failure." My name at the top. A total at the bottom. $347,000. Line items included diapers, formula, pediatric visits, elementary school supplies, middle school tuition at a private school I had attended for 2 years, high school costs, college contributions, and, at the bottom, in its own line, emotional labor, ongoing, $47,000. Welcome to Her Untold Nights. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe and turn on the bell. I read through the invoice twice. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, and I want you to know that my hands did not shake. I had been preparing for something like this for a long time, not this exactly, not the specific shape of it, but something from my mother that would require me to respond with the truth rather than with my feelings. I had been preparing for years. There was just one problem with my mother's invoice. She had billed me for 7 years of parenting she did not do. From the time I was 18 months old until I was 8 years old, my mother was not present in my life in any meaningful way. She did not change my diapers. She did not teach me to read. She did not walk me to the bus stop on the first day of school. She did not hold me when I had nightmares or make my lunches or sit through my school plays. My grandmother did all of those things. My grandmother raised me for 7 years, while my mother was somewhere else, doing something else, being someone other than my mother. I looked at the invoice. I looked at my phone. And I went to find a photograph. My grandmother's name was Pearl. Pearl Okafor, born in Lagos, raised in London, transplanted to Atlanta at 32 when she married my grandfather, and built a life in a neighborhood she came to love with the fierce, deliberate attachment of a woman who chooses her home rather than inheriting it. Pearl was 78 years old on the Mother's Day this story takes place. She had been a retired schoolteacher for 12 years, a churchgoer for all of them, a gardener of startling dedication, and the woman who had raised me from 18 months to 8 years old while my mother, her daughter, Vivienne, was in the process of making a series of choices that took her far from the responsibilities of parenthood. I want to be careful about how I describe my mother's absence, because I think precision matters more than blame in this telling. Vivienne did not abandon me in a dramatic, deliberate way. She did not leave in the night or disappear without a word. What happened was slower and more complicated than that. She was young, 22 when I was born. And she was in a difficult relationship with my father that ended badly, and she was struggling with things she has never fully explained to me, and the struggling took her away first for weekends, then for weeks, then for what became, before anyone fully acknowledged it. 7 years. Pearl never called it abandonment. I want to be clear about that. Pearl, who had every right to be furious at her own daughter, simply did what needed to be done. She took me in. She raised me, and she never once, in all the years I lived with her, said a single negative word about Vivienne in my presence. I did not understand, as a child, that this was an act of extraordinary discipline and love. I understand it now completely. What I remember of those 7 years is warmth. Specific, sensory warmth. The smell of Pearl's kitchen on Sunday mornings, a combination of fried plantains and the particular soap she used that I have never been able to find again. The sound of her reading to me not children's books, though there were those too, but poetry, which she said was better than most children's books because it didn't talk down to you. The feeling of her hand in mine on the walk to the bus stop, firm and dry and absolutely certain. Pearl taught me to read before kindergarten. Pearl walked me to the bus stop every morning of 1st and 2nd grade, wearing the same tan coat, carrying the same canvas bag, waving from the corner until the bus was out of sight. Pearl sat through every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every science fair and spelling bee and uncomfortable milestone of early childhood. Pearl held me when I had nightmares. Pearl made my lunches. Pearl told me, more times than I can count, that I was not difficult or too much or a burden that I was, in her specific words. a complete and sufficient person, and don't let anyone convince you otherwise. When I was 8 years old, Vivienne came back. Not dramatically, no dramatic return, no tearful reunion at the airport. She simply reappeared, more present, more stable, with the specific energy of someone who has done some work on themselves and wants the opportunity to demonstrate it. She moved back to Atlanta. She got an apartment nearby. She started spending weekends with me, then whole weeks, and slowly, with Pearl's quiet facilitation and my own 8-year-old's complicated mix of longing and wariness, something like a mother-daughter relationship began. It was never easy. I want to be honest about that. Vivienne and I have spent the 23 years since her return in a relationship that has always required more maintenance than most, more communication, more negotiation, more conscious effort on both sides to bridge a gap that opened when I was 18 months old and that never fully closed. We have had good years. We have had terrible years. She has made real changes from the person she was in my early childhood, and I have tried, genuinely tried, to receive those changes as the real things they are, rather than as insufficient recompense for what I lost. But Vivienne has also, in the 23 years since her return, carried a specific wound that I have never known how to heal. She is ashamed of the 7 years. Not in the productive way that leads to genuine reckoning and repair, in the defensive way that leads to reframing. She has spent 23 years telling a version of those 7 years that shrinks her absence, expands her contributions, and quietly, persistently repositions Pearl as a helper rather than as the person who actually raised me. I have never fully confronted her about this reframing, not because I was afraid of her, but because I was afraid of what the confrontation would cost Pearl, who had spent her entire life not saying negative things about Vivienne, and who I was not willing to put in the middle of something ugly. What I did not anticipate was that Vivienne would eventually force the confrontation herself, on Mother's Day, via group chat, with a $347,000 invoice. Let me take you through the invoice more carefully, because I think the specific items matter. My mother is not an unintelligent woman. The invoice was formatted with the specific precision of someone who had spent time on it, not thrown together in a moment of anger, but constructed. There was a header with her name and address. There was my name and address as the recipient. There was an invoice number. There was a date, Mother's Day. The itemized list ran to 2 pages. I am going to read you the key sections, because I want you to understand exactly what was being claimed. The first section was titled Early Childhood, ages 0-7. It included infant formula and diapers, estimated at $4,000. Pediatric care, ages 0-7, estimated at $8,000. Clothing, ages 0-7, estimated at $6,000. Elementary school, grades 1 and 2, estimated at $3,000. Primary caregiver time, ages 0-7, at $25 hour, 8 hours per day, 365 days per year, 7 years, $202,000. $202,000 for primary caregiver time, ages 0-7. For 7 years she was not there. I sat with that number for a long moment. $202,000. Billed for the diapers she didn't change, the lunches she didn't pack, the bus stops she never stood at, the nightmares she wasn't there for, the first day of school she missed, the second day, the third, every day of every year of my early childhood that Pearl showed up for and Vivienne did not. The second section was titled Middle and High School, ages 8-18. This section was more complicated, because Vivienne had in fact been present for this period of my life imperfectly, conditionally, with years of effort that I have never fully dismissed. The numbers were inflated in the way that numbers inflated by someone building a case always are, but there was at least a kernel of actual presence underlying them. The third section was the one that took my breath away in a different way. It was titled College and Beyond. My mother had contributed to my college tuition genuinely, and I have always been grateful for it. $15,000 over 4 years, which I knew because I had the paperwork. The invoice listed it as $48,000. I did not argue with the numbers in my head. I simply noted them the way you note something you will need to reference later. I was calm in the way that I have learned to be calm when I am actually very angry, precise, observational, cataloging. The emotional labor, ongoing, $47,000 line I looked at for a long time. I thought about what that phrase meant to the woman who had written it. I thought about Pearl, who had provided emotional labor of extraordinary quality and extraordinary quantity for 7 years and had never once attached a price tag to it. I read the invoice twice. Then I scrolled up in the group chat to see what was already happening. That was peak 2, and it was something I had not anticipated. The family had already been responding for 40 minutes by the time I opened the chat. 48 people. And they were not, the vast majority of them, responding the way my mother had apparently expected. My Aunt Vivienne's own sister had written, "Vivienne, what is this?" My cousin had written, "Is this a joke?" Another cousin, "Mom, what's happening?" Pearl's sister, my great-aunt Josephine, had written simply, "Lord?" There were a few responses that seemed supportive of my mother to cousins I had never been close to, and one of my mother's friends who I did not know was in the group chat, and probably should not have been. But the overwhelming tenor of the responses was confusion, discomfort, and in several cases what read as genuine alarm at what Vivienne had sent. My mother had sent the invoice expecting, I think, a certain kind of response outrage on her behalf, perhaps. Or at least a public acknowledgement from the family that I was indeed the failure she was billing. What she received instead was her own family reflecting the invoice back at her with the collective expression of 47 people who were not sure what they were looking at, but were fairly sure it was not okay. I did not respond yet. I read the thread, I noted who had said what, and then I put my phone down and I went to find the photograph. It was in a box in my closet, a shoebox I had kept for 15 years, full of the specific small objects that matter without being frameable. Letters from Pearl in her schoolteacher's handwriting. A birthday card from my grandfather who passed when I was 12. A few photographs. The photograph I was looking for was at the bottom of the box, protected by a piece of tissue paper that I had wrapped around it years ago, understanding without being fully conscious of the understanding that this particular image needed to be kept carefully. It was a Polaroid. Faded at the edges the way Polaroids fade, the colors slightly shifted toward warmth. It had been taken on a porch, Pearl's porch, the same porch where Pearl still sat on Sunday afternoons when the weather was good. In the photograph, Pearl was sitting in the porch chair and she was holding a baby. The baby was me. I am perhaps 6 months old in the photograph. Pearl is looking down at me with an expression I have spent 30 years trying to fully describe and cannot. It is love, obviously, but it is a specific kind of love. The kind that has decided something that has looked at a small person and made a commitment so complete that it is visible on the face of the person making it. At the bottom of the photograph, written in my grandfather's handwriting, Mother's Day. Pearl and baby Nadia. Mother's Day. 30 years ago, almost exactly. Pearl on that porch, holding me. On the same day, my own mother had chosen to send a $347,000 invoice to 48 relatives. No Vivienne in the frame. No Vivienne anywhere in the photograph. Just Pearl. And me. And a Mother's Day 30 years earlier when the only mother present was the one who had shown up. I understood, holding that photograph, exactly what I was holding. I understood what it would say, without a single word of explanation, to every person in that group chat who was old enough to remember those years. I took a picture of the photograph with my phone. I opened the group chat. And I posted it. No caption. No explanation. No argument. Just the image. Pearl and baby Nadia. Mother's Day. 30 years ago. I posted the photograph at 9:47 in the morning. By 10:15, 23 people had reacted to it. By 11, the reactions had become responses not to me, but to the photograph itself. People saying things like, "I remember this day," and "Pearl, look at you," and "This is the sweetest thing," with the specific warmth of people who had known Pearl for decades and understood without being told what the photograph was saying. My mother responded at 11:22. She wrote, "This is not relevant to the conversation I was trying to have." My Aunt Diane, Vivienne's sister, the one who had written Vivienne, "What is this?" wrote back, "Vivienne, it's extremely relevant. You billed Nadia for raising her from birth to 7. Pearl raised her from birth to 7. This photograph makes that undeniable." My mother wrote, "Pearl was helping. I was still her mother, Aunt Diane wrote. For 7 years? My mother did not respond to that question. The thread moved quickly after that, the way threads move when a truth has been said clearly enough that there is nothing to argue with. My cousin wrote that she remembered me living at Pearl's house. She was 7 when I was born and had specific memories of visiting Pearl and finding me there. Always. Year after year. My great-aunt Josephine wrote that she had been there for those years and that calling Pearl a helper was not accurate. My father's cousin, who I had not spoken to in years, wrote that he had always known something was wrong with the story Vivienne told about that time, and that he was glad the truth was finally in the open. I did not participate in the thread. I had said what I needed to say with the photograph. I watched from my kitchen table as 47 people worked through something I had been working through for 31 years, and I felt for the first time in as long as I could remember that I did not have to work through it alone. By noon, my mother had left the group chat. By 2 in the afternoon, I began receiving notification that she was being removed from individual contact lists, people texting me privately to say they had blocked her. Some of them with explanations, some of them simply with the message, "I'm so sorry, Nadia, I didn't know." By the end of that day, 47 of the 48 people in the group chat had blocked my mother or removed her from their contacts or both. The 48th was Pearl. Pearl did not block her daughter. I did not know that evening what Pearl had done instead. I found out the next morning, my own response to my mother, my personal response. Separate from the photograph came in the form of a phone call I made that afternoon, after the thread had gone quiet. I called her directly. She answered after 4 rings, which told me she had been deciding whether to answer. I said, "Mom, I'm not going to talk about the invoice. I think the photograph said what needed to be said. But I do want to say one thing directly, so there's no confusion about where I stand." She said, very quietly, "What?" I said, "Pearl raised me for 7 years. Not as a helper. As my mother, in every way that word actually means something. I have spent 31 years trying to build something with you that honored both those truths simultaneously, what she was, and what you became after you came back. I have done that imperfectly, and so have you. But I cannot allow a $347,000 invoice to stand as the family's understanding of my early childhood without correcting it. The photograph was the correction." She said, "I was still your mother, Nadia. Legally, technically," I said, "Mom, I know. I'm not erasing you. I am telling you that Pearl cannot be erased either. What you sent this morning tried to erase her. I won't allow that." A long silence. She said, "I didn't think it would go like this." I said, "I know. I think you thought the family would see the invoice and feel sorry for you. I think you underestimated how many of them actually remember those years." Another silence. Then, very quietly, "What did my mother do?" I said, "I don't know yet. I'm going to call her tomorrow." I called Pearl the next morning. She answered on the second ring, which meant she had been expecting my call. She said, "Good morning, baby," in the same voice she had used every morning of my early childhood, and I felt something loosen in my chest that I had not known was tight. I said, "Good morning, Grandma. How are you?" She said, "I am very well, thank you. I imagine you're calling about yesterday." I said, "I am." "Mom asked me last night what you did." I told her I didn't know yet. Pearl said, "Well, I wrote her a letter." I said, "A letter." She said, "A handwritten letter. 12 pages. I started it yesterday afternoon and finished it this morning. I've sent copies to Diane, to Josephine, and to 3 other people in the family who I think needed to read it. I mailed the original to your mother's apartment." I said, "What does it say?" Pearl was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It says the truth. It says it carefully and completely and with love. Because I do love my daughter even now, even after yesterday. But it says the truth, Nadia, the full truth, in 12 pages, in my handwriting, signed with my name. Everything I have not said for 30 years, because I was afraid of what saying it would cost. I decided yesterday that I am 78 years old, and I do not have 30 more years to spend not saying it." I sat with that for a long moment. I said, "Can you tell me what's in it?" She said, I'll send you a copy. But I want to tell you the most important part myself, because it's about you, and I want you to hear it from me directly." I said, "Okay," she said. "The letter begins with the 7 years. It goes through them month by month, for the first 2 years, because I kept a diary then and I still have it. Month by month, for 2 years, what I did and what Vivienne did not do. After the first 2 years, it becomes less detailed. I did not keep a diary the whole time, but it covers the significant moments. Your first steps, which I witnessed. Your first word, which was more, said to me at the breakfast table. Your first day of kindergarten, which I attended. Your second grade reading award, which I was in the audience for. It covers every significant milestone of your first 7 years, Nadia, and it names, for each one, who was present." I said, very quietly, she wasn't there for any of them. Pearl said, no, she wasn't. And I have never said that to anyone in all these years, because I did not want to be the woman who said terrible things about her own child. But your mother sent a $347,000 invoice to 48 people, calling herself your primary caregiver for the first 7 years of your life. And I am 78 years old, and I will not let that stand uncorrected. Not because I want to hurt her. Because you deserve to have the truth of who raised you be on record, somewhere in someone's handwriting, before I am no longer here to write it. I did not cry on that phone call. I had promised myself I would not, because I wanted to be fully present for what Pearl was saying, and crying would have taken me somewhere else. I cried after. In the bathroom for a long time, in a way that felt less like grief and more like something releasing that had been held for 31 years. The letter arrived at my mother's apartment, I was told by Aunt Diane, 2 days after Mother's Day. Aunt Diane had read her copy and called me immediately afterward, not to give me the contents were between Pearl and Vivienne, but to tell me that it was the most extraordinary document she had ever read, and that she believed, in all her years of knowing Pearl, that it was the truest thing Pearl had ever allowed herself to say. I have not read the letter myself. Pearl offered to share it with me, and I said no, because I understood that some truths between a mother and a daughter are not mine to enter, even when that daughter is my mother and that truth concerns me. Pearl had written it for Vivienne. I had the photograph. That was enough. My mother called me 3 weeks after Mother's Day. The call was brief and careful and unlike any call we have had in 31 years. She did not apologize in the way that an apology covers everything. She said she was sorry for the invoice, specifically, and that she understood it had been wrong, and that she had done something she could not undo. She said she was not ready to talk about everything the letter contained, because she was still working through it. She said she thought maybe she needed to see someone, a therapist, someone who could help her with things she had been carrying for a long time. I said, Mom, I think that's a good idea. I think it's the best idea you've had in a long time. She said, I don't know how to fix this. I said, I don't know either. But I think the fixing starts with you understanding the truth of those 7 years, fully, without the story you've been telling yourself about them. Pearl's letter is a start. Let it land. The family landscape after Mother's Day is different from what it was before. 47 people know, now, in a way that cannot be unknown, that Pearl raised me and that my mother was not there for 7 years. Some of them knew it already and had never said so. Some of them are genuinely learning it for the first time. The knowing has changed things, not dramatically, not with the complete restructuring that sometimes happens in these stories, but in the specific, important way that the truth changes things when it finally surfaces. It gives everyone a shared reality to stand on, rather than the competing individual versions that had been circulating for decades. Pearl is, at 78, the same person she has always been. She gardens, she attends church, she reads poetry, she sits on her porch on Sunday afternoons when the weather is good. She does not seem, from the outside, like a woman who has just sent a 12-page letter that reordered her family's understanding of 30 years of history. She seems like Pearl. I visit her every Sunday. I have done this for years, and I will continue doing it for as many years as she gives me. We drink tea, and she tells me things she has been reading, and I tell her about my week. And sometimes we sit quietly and watch the birds in the garden, and the porch is the same porch it has always been, the one in the photograph. The one where Mother's Day started and where I intend for it to continue. If someone has ever tried to rewrite your story, to replace the truth of who raised you, who showed up for you, who loved you without an invoice, I want to say something directly. The truth is more durable than the story someone tells about you. It survives. It sits quietly in old photographs and in the memories of people who were there and in the handwriting of women who kept diaries for 2 years, because they understood, even then, that what they were doing was worth documenting. My mother sent a $347,000 invoice and called it the cost of raising a failure. The invoice was a story, her version of history. Itemized and formatted and sent to 48 people as a declaration of what had happened. What the photograph said, without a single word, was, "This is also what happened. And this is who was actually there." You do not always have to argue. Sometimes you simply have to produce the evidence. A photograph. A letter. A diary. The memory of a woman who kept showing up, month after month, year after year, for 7 years, asking nothing in return, saying nothing against the person who wasn't there, simply being the mother that the situation required. Pearl did not block her daughter. She wrote 12 pages instead, because she is 78 years old and she has learned that silence, in the face of a lie told loudly enough, is not loyalty. It is permission. And she was no longer willing to give permission for her own story and mine to be erased. The people who truly raised you deserve credit. Whatever that raising looked like, a grandmother on a porch, an aunt who stepped in, a neighbor who showed up, a teacher who stayed late, they deserve to have their story be the true one. Not the edited version that someone else constructed for convenience. I have a Polaroid photograph on my desk. Pearl and baby Nadia. Mother's Day. The same porch. The same woman. The truth, in faded color, 30 years old and still standing. That is not nothing. That is everything. Thank you for spending this time with me. If Nadia's story resonated with you, if someone has ever tried to rewrite the truth of who showed up for you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments.